So welcome everyone to our Basketball Victoria Health and Wellbeing webinar. My name's Justine Salida and I'm the People and Culture Manager at Basketball Victoria. I'm very excited to be joined by Frank Arsego today, who's not only working in the health and wellbeing space, but he's also been a basketball coach all the way through to the elite levels for many years, both here in Australia and internationally. So very pleased to have you join us, Frank. Frank's also been working with Basketball Victoria's high performance athletes recently. So we're very pleased to have had you involved in those programs and had those touch points with our athletes. We have many of you joining us today, and a lot of people work across all different aspects of basketball. So today we're really aiming to bring awareness and just give you some practical strategies for mental health and wellbeing. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. If you can keep yourself on mute, you can ask any questions in the chat function and we'll be checking that. We'll endeavour to answer them at the end of the session, and the slide deck and the recording will be available after the session. If we don't get to your question, we will answer them after the session. And now I'll pass it over to Frank. So Frank, if you could tell us a bit more about yourself to begin with, and how you got to work in the wellbeing space, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Justine, for the opportunity to be involved today and that nice introduction. So hello everyone. Obviously my name's Frank Arsego, and I'm going to spend some time with you today having a bit of a chat around the mental health and wellbeing space. I actually got into that area whilst I was still a full-time professional basketball coach. And as you're probably aware, in the world of coaching, it's always nice to have a job, and sometimes we don't have a job. So in between my time when I came back from New Zealand, working with the Breakers, and coming back, I reconnected with a young man that I worked with with the Canberra Gunners in the Siebel program, and Glenn continues to work in mental health and wellbeing, and he asked me to come along and join in because he felt sort of like had this ability just to resonate with young people, and coaching can do that for you. And so so he asked me to come along, and off and on in between jobs, I've spent my time just developing my skills and really becoming more passionate about mental health and wellbeing. And I've actually found that it's actually helped me become a better coach with my teams and athletes and organisations. So so that's briefly how I became involved in mental health and wellbeing. But for some people that I'm meeting today for the first time, and it's great to see such a list of people in so many roles in our basketball community today listening in, and I'm very grateful for your time. We've got club presidents, we've got GMs, we've got administrators, we've got coordinators, parents, coaches, coaching directors, vice presidents, business operations, high performance people. So it is a really big cross section of people across the industry. So I'm very appreciative of you all giving your time to listen in today and have a chat around this area. So thank you very much. So myself personally, just in the world of basketball briefly, it's been a long-lived life journey. I started coaching back in 1979, which is a long time. And back then I felt like a young person. Today, I feel like Lindsay Gaze, like the old person in the group. So, and all that time that's flown by and all the things that have happened. So for me, I just lived a journey in the Australian basketball pathway. So for everyone out there, I started off as an under 14 Division 2 boys coach at West Adelaide. And from that small beginning, I had an opportunity to do club programs, senior programs, state teams. Had a wonderful opportunity to work at the Australian Institute of Sport and coached national under 20 men's junior teams, and then had an opportunity to coach professionally overseas in New Zealand and in Singapore. But I'd also like to say that whilst coaching, I also had opportunities to become a director of coaching at a club and look after all the junior teams, which was very challenging. And one of my last roles was as a technical director for Basketball Singapore, which is like looking after the whole ecosystem of basketball in a country. So that was challenging in itself as well. So currently, what am I doing? I'm mentoring, enjoying mentoring. I'm still doing some things for the Basketball Academy in Singapore, which is like a participation academy across the country. Also doing some mentoring for a coach in Fiji who started up a new club on the island. And I'm currently having a lived experience as I do mentoring for the state under-16 ACT men's basketball team. So I have a former player that's looking after that program. And yeah, so I've had a lived experience of walking into a gym on Sunday and actually seeing what it's like now with all the restrictions that are in place. And to be honest with you, it wasn't deflating because the kids were fantastic, but it just like there was not one parent in the gym. There was spacing, we were cleaning, we were wiping, it was really different. And yeah, so that's something I wanted to share with you today about what it might look like going forward. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me. So just as we move forward today, yeah, some issues, some discussion, some topics, some strategies around mental health and wellbeing. And I've opened up that little slide with, even amidst the uncertainty and the crisis, we can still respond in a positive and positive manner. So, Justine, thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Frank. So, I mean, in terms of wellbeing, it's something that we hear about all the time. You know, it sounds good. It's something that we want to have. And can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah. Yeah, there, as we're aware, even before COVID-19, there's been a lot of work and energy done out there in the workspace to promote mental health and well-being. And so I think for myself personally, I'd like to just discuss today a little bit about the word well-being from my point of view. And really, well-being is really finding the right balance. And I think that's one of the things that we're all going to be dealing with over this period of time. And that is finding the right balance in our workplace environment, whether it be a club, association, teams that we coach, along with also things away from work, which would mean like my family, my other job potentially, all these other areas. So well-being is not a thing that we either have or don't have. It's the ability to to manage or respond to a situation or circumstance that we're facing. And the balance and balancing the challenges and the resources we have. So I think people who have good well-being really understand the concept of challenges and resources. And I think that's something I'd like people to take a moment today to reflect on. And that is, in COVID-19 and where we are at the moment, there are many, many challenges. There are new demands, there are different things coming at us at different rates. And I think the idea is not to sort of like become overwhelmed with the number of them, but to be able to look at each challenge for what it is, and then try and find out, do I have the resources to work through this challenge? Do I have the knowledge? Do I have the people around me? Do I have the support? Where can I go to get some information? And the people that have good well-being usually will have a balance between their challenges and their resources. When we don't, and that is, we have our challenges way too high and we don't have enough resources, or you know, or the other way around, then what happens is people become stressed, we become a little confused, we can become overwhelmed, right? And we are finding that in these times, and with the demands changing and things changing sometimes from a day-to-day basis, I can only give you an example as a person that lives in the ACT, hearing that now we have some spikes in Victoria, and now there's council areas that are being looked at, and you know that I'm sure that some of those areas were thinking, oh, in a couple of weeks we'll be starting our junior sporting commitments, and now there could be some doubt. So you may also feel a little powerless at times. You think you're in control, but then all of a sudden something comes along and knocks you back and makes it a bit difficult. So for me, for the people out there, I'd really love you to think about what is my challenge today? What have I got to deal with this week? What are my resources? And if I can have a balance and even out that both sides of that ledger, then the probability is that you will have good well-being. So I'd like people to keep that in mind. Oh, by the way, I'd like to also add that as you move forward, there's a new little terminology out there that you might hear due to COVID, and that is the new normal. Oh, it's the new normal, right? And when it comes to well-being, that will be different for everyone, whatever the new normal may be. So I know there's a discussion about let's bounce back to how it used to be, but the reality is that there will be change in the future, and that's me looking at it from a person on the outside and also a sports person. And it's a matter now of reinventing yourselves to embrace the new normal, whatever that may be. Maybe the next slide, Matt.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
And there's so much uncertainty at the moment, as you say, and it really is, as we were talking earlier about, this is sort of a marathon and not something that we're necessarily going to get through really quickly. So it is important to find that balance. So in terms of people in our basketball community, and a lot of people that are online today, we have others that rely on us, or they come to us for support. But with COVID-19, we're all going through this. So how do we maintain our own health and wellbeing?
Yes, well, Justine, I think probably the next slide would sort of like gives us a bit of a lead into some strategies around maintaining our own wellbeing. And may I say that I'm as part of today's session, I'm relaying probably a theme of a lot of information that's out there for people to find, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. So the premise of really how do we look after ourselves really comes back to self-care, right? And it comes in sort of like two stages that I think are really important. And that is, firstly, in self-care is really to have an understanding of what keeps you well. So you as a person who goes on your day-to-day life, your working life, what are the things that keep you well? And there is a theme of things that generally keep people well, and they've been emphasized a lot over this last few months, encouraging people to do the following sorts of things. Probably the number one thing that's been out there, the number one on the hit list is connections, right? Being able to stay connected, whether it be family, work colleagues, friends overseas, wherever they may be, and then also in the workplace. So I know for a fact in the high performance program at Basketball Victoria, we've made an effort, the coaches have made a regular effort to stay connected with their athletes over this period of time when they haven't been able to have face-to-face. So in the world of sport, I personally feel that connections and relationships are like the core fundamental thing of a sporting club or a community or a sporting community. So connections are really important, how they may be for you. Other things that are important that keep you well are things around exercise, being physically active, whatever that may be, your ability to continue to eat well, having good nutrition, good hydration, taking care of your body, your physical health is really important. Obviously, when we're stressed, overwhelmed, and things are on our mind, it's very difficult to shut down. One of the things that does get impacted greatly is sleep. And sleep is something that we should all make a really good effort to understand that, generally 8 hours sleep for an adult is pretty important to help with recovery and get you ready for your next day's activities. If sleep and exercise and nutrition aren't traveling too well, then one of the things that will probably be impacted a great deal is your mood. And I think that's one of the things that's out there at the moment as we're going through these stresses and these times of uncertainty and what's coming up next, becoming a little bit overwhelmed, then one's mood will be affected. But I've found from my recent work and people that I've been dealing with that you can still maintain a pretty good mood if your connections are up and you're able to connect with people and continue your talking and discussing through things. That can definitely help you stay on top of things with regards to your mood. And probably the last thing that's probably relevant to maybe many people today that are here, that work at clubs and associations. Some of you are full-time, some of you are part-time, some of you are volunteers, and that meaning that you have other jobs and other commitments. And that is finances, how you're traveling in that space. So with COVID and layoff of jobs, or your part-time job's gone, or your full-time job may be moved on, that would definitely have a big bearing on what keeps you well. So making sure that issues around finance, maybe your employment situation's in a good place, all those sorts of things. So, but fundamentally, if those 6 things are looked at and are traveling well, then generally from a self-care point of view, you should be in a pretty good place. So they're some of the areas we really consider and like people to think about, and take time to prioritize those areas of self-care. And they don't have to be massive projects. For some people, exercise could be just walking the dog at the end of the day. For some people, it might, now that we can do a little bit of face-to-face, might just be a cup of coffee with a friend and having a chat about how the week went. So there's small things that you can do that can really go a long way to help you with your self-care in these particular difficult times. And once you're working on what those things that keep you well, make sure you make a plan and keep to it, and lock it in during the day, whatever that might be. If you have a free window, if you have a half hour or an hour, choose one of those things and lock it in and make sure it's part of your day-to-day routine. That would go a long way. The next thing that I'd like to just engage with is the little topic up there, asking for help. Now, in these times where things are really tough, one of the things that's, well, I can speak for men, we're renowned for being poor for asking for help, right? But even in the workplace, some people maybe might feel reluctant, or there might be some situations where they won't come forward to ask for help. But the objective for asking for help is in reducing the challenges and the demands that are being built up because of the situation we're in. So it's not just a flippant thing, but as the stresses build up, or my commitments are becoming too much, or I'm really worried about this, then I think you should take a moment to just maybe look at those 4 dot points or so with regards to asking for help. And that is, what have you noticed about yourself at the moment that's a little bit different and a little bit off about yourself as a person? What's happening to me? What's happening? I'm just becoming overwhelmed. I'm not hearing anything. I don't have my work that I normally have. Like, you know, I'm supposed to be doing these many hours, but I'm not doing these many hours. Those sorts of things. And then, how am I feeling about that? Am I feeling anxious? Am I worried? You know, am I emotionally overcome by the whole situation? Am I stressing out? So once you get an understanding of how you're traveling in this space, the next thing is, what do I need from the person I'm asking? So I've decided, look, I really need some help, but then in your own mind, you need to know what you need. Whether it might be, hey, I need a few hours off because something's not going right for me away from work, or it'd be really good if I could just spend an hour with you and just talk about through the selection of these teams and how we're going to get them all. One of the biggest things I've found, just as a talking point from my lived experience on the weekend, is that a lot of teams that want to train now in the ACT are finding it very hard to find venues to train. So even though things have opened up, they can't actually get into these venues because they're either not the right size, or it's not appropriate, or all these other reasons are coming up. So being able to reach out and know exactly what you need to make it work for you. And then in your own mind is, how can they support me? how can they really support me to get through this and work together as a team, or give me the right resources, point me in the right direction, and can I have some follow-up? So there's some things for you to think about, some practical things. Self-care is really important. If you're not traveling well, it makes it pretty hard to get everybody else at the club to travel well. But if you're out in front and doing well and looking after yourself, then you can deal with those things. And being able to ask for help, I think, is a really good thing in these difficult times with regards to reducing your challenges and your demands. Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Thanks very much, Frank. And I mean, just hearing you talk about that, it really makes me think of that visual of putting on your own oxygen mask in the aeroplane before you assist others. And I think you can't really be of great assistance to others if you're not looking after yourself in the first instance. So really important messaging there.
Yeah,
so in terms of one of the reasons why we wanted to get together and have this webinar today was to just raise awareness and prepare people in our community. So if they are approached by someone going through a tough time, can they feel comfortable in handling it the best way that they can? Or if you notice a real change in someone's behaviour and you want to check in with them and see if they're okay, what are some of the questions we can ask?
Yeah, I think that's a really important one, this particular segment of our discussion. Questions that you, when asking, when looking to support someone else. And I think, as we mentioned earlier, we have a massive cross-section of people that are tuning in today from the basketball community. And I think what we've got up at the moment with regards to these 6 little questions go a long way to getting to the crux of a person's problem. Because from my experiences in mental health, what we find is someone will come to you with a crisis or an issue or a problem, and then there'll be excuses and stories, and there'll be emotion, and there'll be a whole variety of different things. And you could be listening to this person and doing the right thing by listening and tuning in, but at the end of it, we don't have the information. We don't have the information to actually be able to help that person move forward. And I've found that these 6 questions are actually quite generic across a lot of things. You can use these questions in the workplace. You can use these questions with someone that's struggling. You can use these questions with your partner if you have something coming up at home. You can use this with your kids. So I find them to be really useful to help you navigate through when someone might be struggling. So obviously the first thing is, if in the discussion, is to find out what the problem is and actually ask that question. And so when we have a myriad of different things happening across our basketball community, that problem could be many problems. It could be, there's so many things that could be happening for someone out there with COVID, the impact on someone's personal life and then their sporting life. It's sort of like it's a big multiplier. So ask the question, what is the problem? And then it's important to ask how long this has been going on for. And so for some people, this might have just eventuated over the last month when they've lost their job. This could be something that was happening in the middle of last year, even before COVID had actually arrived. So the issue here is how long has it been going on, and get a gist of where they are in that. And then the next question, which is really important, is what is the impact? So now that we know this problem, it's been going on for this long, so what are some of the things that have been happening for you? And generally, the little question at the end there, what are you doing more of? What are you doing less of? So for example, my problem is I'm having some issues at work, right? And it's not going too well. How long has this been going? The last couple of months, I just feel that I'm not getting the support, or I'm not getting something. How's this impact? He said, what are you doing more of? I'm sleeping less. I'm only getting 2 hours of sleep a night. So, or what are you doing more? Well, I'm drinking a little bit more now. I'm sort of like having a little bit more, or I'm arguing a little bit more, right, with people. I'm a bit more snappy, right? What are you doing less of? I'm doing less exercise now because I'm buried in work all the time. So the doing more less thing is a good way of finding out what are some of the things that might be going on as they're being impacted. It just pads it out a little bit more. And then the question about what support do you have you got or have you used? So this discussion could be, you could be the first one hearing about it, or they could say to you, look, you know, I've reached out to this and it hasn't quite worked out, and I've spoken to this person and I didn't really get the right answer. Okay, and so that gives you an insight of where they are in that space. And then the question of what would be most useful right now. So that question's a really good question because it allows you to work collaboratively with that person. It's not like your total recommendation, right? Oh, well, I think you need to do this and do that. And well, I don't think you did a very good job about that. And so it takes away about being judgmental, and you can work collectively together. And it's really important to understand that when you're working with someone, and I like to bring this up now, is that the reality is we're not all counselors, we're not all psychologists, when we're not specialists. In the general frame of things, in the community that we're in, we have a relationship through sport, and you're there to support someone. So the idea is to work with them, be able to listen to them, what they've got to say, and if you can do that, then you can work collaboratively in finding what would be most helpful for them right now, and then ask them what's next. What's next? What's the next thing we can do together to get this done? And yeah, so I find these 6 questions to be very useful. I'm sure that there'll be, in the area of mental health wellbeing in particular, they really help you move through someone that may be struggling and actually get some substance in the conversation, which is really important to help them out. But I also believe that in sport, wherever that may be now, if a parent came up to you and said, oh, look, I don't know if Johnny's going to come back when we start training, then, and you're not quite sure, you might say, well, what's the problem? You know, and get some feedback, and then say, oh, so it's been going on, it's just started. And then obviously from the information that you gather, you may develop some strategies that would work to be able to retain that person at the club and the kid at the club. Yeah. So I think if there's some practical tools in using those questions. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much, Frank. And I think that's something we can really come away with today, just having some really clear ideas of what we would go through with the person. And the way that these are framed is bringing that person along and helping them make the decisions as well, so that you're not just taking responsibility for their future, that they are being part of those decisions about what would be helpful to them and what are the next steps. So thanks very much for that. So, you know, once we go through these questions with someone, there will be times when we really need to refer them onto a professional service or some kind of other resource because it's really above our expertise. So can you tell us where we can get help and any services that you recommend?
Yeah, certainly. Matt, we might bring up the next slide. Yeah. Look, thanks, Matt. So in this time of chaos, there is so many services out there that are putting their hands up to help people out. The federal government's thrown in a lot more money towards some of the main organisations that are out there. The majority of the organisations that I have up here today under helpful resources, they've been around for a long time. They're all out there, and there's many more out there. But I chose these few because they're the most common ones that are out there. They provide excellent support. These support, they provide great information. The majority of these sites will provide counselling, and also some of these sites will have the ability to refer you on to even more specialist help if you need it. So these have been around pre-COVID. But what I will say is, if you go into some of these sites, what you will find now that a lot of the services have actually updated their language to utilize COVID-19. So you could go onto the Beyond Blue website and there'll be some stuff, information, fact sheets around helping you through COVID-19. You could go to, where else? There's probably, yes, somewhere like Headspace. You could go onto there and there'll be some sort of fact sheet around dealing with the COVID-19 issues with regards to our youth. So everyone's sort of like drawn this extra information. So there's a similar theme across all the support organisations, but I would recommend the following situations. If you are involved with helping someone out, as always, if they are really in crisis, probably the best thing to do is call 000 straight away. If you feel that you have a talking relationship with this person, they've opened up, there is trust, they realise you're there to support them, then I would also then suggest that one of the things that we've done in our workplace is we do encourage people, because I'm not sometimes the expert, but what we do encourage is to visit their GP. If they have a family GP, that's one of the really great points to start with if you want to have a really good face-to-face conversation, and they can provide some insight into even potentially a mental health plan and get you connected. If not, then we may be talking to someone and they say, look, I really need to talk to someone about this. And then we take the opportunity to refer them on to places like Lifeline and Beyond Blue. Kids Helpline is a fantastic helpline. That's for counselling from 5 to 25-year-olds. So, if your kids are struggling and they're not doing well about not being able to get back to sport, or they're or they're struggling with school and those sorts of things, then that's a great service. Obviously, Headspace is also another service, but they provide services from 12 to 25-year-olds. Obviously, COVID and issues around money. Money Smart is a good site to go on. They too have updated information with the COVID fact sheets and so forth. Obviously, 1-800-RESPECT is our national provider with regard to domestic violence. Men's Line Australia deals with issues around relationships and family issues, generally for men. And Victoria Direct Line is a line that you can ring when people are struggling and they've said, look, I'm drinking more, or I might be, on substance abuse stuff. I'm doing more of that, and so they're just the general things, some general resources that you can use in that space. Also, as I said, your GP is a great source to go with. I'm not sure, Justine, but maybe even for example, even our staff, that the Basketball Victoria staff, who I forgot to acknowledge at the start of the presentation, they may have an EAP service. Some people may have an EAP service that I would strongly recommend. That's an employee assistance program, and they too can also refer on to other organisations to help. So there's a variety of different resources that people could use in that space.
Yeah, so I'd also reiterate around the GP. I think having a really good regular GP that you've got that relationship with is really important. And so it is worth taking the time to find a GP that you have a good relationship with and can talk quite openly with. So I definitely agree with you there, Frank. And in terms of all of these resources, they're available for when there's a problem, but there's also some circumstances where you don't necessarily have to wait until there's a problem, like particularly Headspace and things like that you've mentioned. They can be a bit more on the wellbeing and preventative side to sort of keep managing it. So some really good resources there. So Matt, if we can go to the next one, we're just going to see if we've got some questions on the next slide. Frank, I've just seen that we've had a question from Sally about whether you'd recommend Sports Chaplaincy Australia. I'm not sure if you are prepared to sort of talk about specific places or not, or what are your thoughts on that?
It was Sally, was it?
Yes, that's
right. Thanks, Sally, for bringing that up. Look, I think I will mention that in years gone by, we've actually had a person from that organisation help me when I was coaching the Siebel team, and he was a fantastic resource. And I would encourage people who are out there who come across anything that they think will be beneficial to them or the people that they're working with, I think to hook up with them and use them. Yeah, if you feel confident, you feel they have the ability to provide that, maybe that empathy or that integrity, that's really important, then by all means bring in who you need to get things done. And I can only speak highly of the Sports Chaplaincy program. It was just a wonderful resource for our guys to have a guy that they could basically go to and have a chat about some issues that might be going on for them at that point in time. So that's from a sports context, I think Sally's right on the money.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I think in this kind of mental wellbeing space as well, different solutions will help different circumstances and perhaps different cultures. So I think it's not always a one-size-fits-all solution. So Sally's just said thank you very much, Frank, there.
Thank you.
If anyone else has any further questions, just feel free to put them into the chat box. I have prepared just a couple of questions for you, Frank, if we've got some time.
Yeah, sure.
So one of the things that I get asked from time to time is, what if someone comes to me telling me that they're struggling mentally, and I'm quite worried about what they're telling me, but they've said to me, I must keep it a secret and don't tell anyone. What should I do in that circumstance?
Well, that's quite a difficult one, a difficult question. But I think one of the underpinning things that helps you get through that particular thing about should I keep it a secret, or you've been asked to keep it a secret. I think one of the key things in that space is that a lot has to do with your own personal relationship with that person, how close you are. Is it just a professional work-related thing? Is it is it a coach to player? Is it is it a coach to GM at the club? Is it husband and wife? Is it so it's a lot's got to do with the relationship with that between the two people. That lays a foundation, but there are some things that really truly need to be considered. Firstly, and most importantly, is that you have to understand that we, as people that are providing support, we can't solve all the problems. Like I've mentioned to you earlier, we're not all counsellors, we're not all psychologists, we're not all professional service providers. And therefore, to be asked to keep something a secret is, I feel the answer should be flat out no. Because you're left with the burden, you're carrying the burden of someone's issues. And ideally, that's probably not the best place to be, because it'll be felt like the person will feel like you're the one that's going to solve this problem, where the reality is you're not the one that's going to solve the problem. You're just there to support. Now, the final thing that's really, really important, if at any time you think the person would be considering harming themselves, or their actions or what they're thinking about or where they're going may actually harm other people, then you have an obligation to make sure that someone knows about that. So the reality for me is, if someone asks you to keep a secret, I think the key thing there is keep working with them, encourage them that we really can't keep this secret. We need to reach out. We need to find someone else that we can go to that will help support them. And if you're able to do that, I think you've done your job. But with regards to keeping a secret, I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's a lot of pressure to take on if you're taking on everyone's problems in that sense. And I think if you set those boundaries at the start,
yes,
then it does help people understand, your position and just keep things really clear to everyone involved.
Yes.
So just another one ready to hit you with, if that's all right.
Yeah.
And anyone else, if they want to jump in, just feel free to ask a question. So another thing that people might feel is that, like we've talked about during the webinar today, we're not counsellors or psychologists and not really an expert in helping people with these problems. What if I say the wrong thing? Am I going to do more harm from getting involved? What should I do in that sense?
Yeah, saying the wrong thing. At times there may be potential to say the wrong thing, even though you might mean well, and the person's explaining something to you, and then all of a sudden it doesn't sort of like come out right, or they haven't heard it right. So I think there's some little things to keep in mind when you're probably in this discussion. I think listening is really important. Having some empathy is key. Being able to listen, be empathetic to the person's need. Don't be judgmental. Feel like that you're providing them with some support and encouragement to seek that further help. Sort of like some things that to have in the back of your mind that will help you sort of like not push forward and get into that space where you may say the wrong thing. One of the things that I got taught that I thought was really important was, if you feel you've done or said the wrong thing, start again. Stop the conversation and say, look, I don't think I said the right thing there. No, please don't take that what I said wasn't right. Can we start again? And I don't think there's any shame in that or anything wrong with that, because there's an awareness that in yourself that it wasn't quite right. And even if you say, look, I've said something, but that's not right, we should ask someone else what is the right thing, and move them on in that space. So that's what I would recommend or suggest. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just having a look at the chat here from Rod Bush.
Yep.
So in terms of technical officials, it could be argued that they have a very stressful job to begin with. And this level of stress is clearly going to increase as we return to play with modified rules and concerns about social distancing. Should associations be taking account of this in terms of the controlling the conditions that match officials will find themselves in? For example, minimising interaction with angry parents and fans, etc.
Well, and that was from Tony, is that right?
No, so from Rod Bush.
From Rod. Apologies. Yeah. Yeah, that would be my suggestion. If Rod came to me and said something like that, I would say he would need to sit down with the GM of the association, seek some information from Basketball Victoria as the governing body, and seek out what will be the protocols going forward. And then what would happen is there would need to be support out there for our referees. There needs some people in their corner. So on game night, there'd be like a referee supervisor where the referees could go out and do their job. And if some things are happening, then this supervisor could step in and say, hey, look, this is what we're dealing with at the moment. These are our new guidelines. This is how it happens. And so I think it has to be a bit of a collective thing. Probably if you ask me from my opinion, I think the referees having some more support people around them, having some really clear guidelines about what's in and out, and then put up the appropriate information out there so that parents know that this won't be tolerated. And, who knows, Rod, there might not be any parents ever again to watch kids play. Wouldn't that be great? No, was that probably not appropriate to say that. Probably not appropriate to say that. But
and,
you know what I'm
in
saying?
terms of the support, I think having the biosafety officer there who's going to help out with making sure people are socially distancing and those kind of things, they should act as a support to the referees or the technical officials, so they're not feeling like they have to take all that on themselves.
Yes, I think so. Justine.
Yeah. So another one from Tony. So just wondering if you have any key observations or criteria to assist in identifying a young person who may be having issues for early recognition. So I guess in that sense, it's trying to identify an issue before it gets to a really serious stage.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one. One of the things is that I've noticed that best summarizes it is every kid's different, and every kid's sort of like going through some different things. Sometimes they're in a high and they're ticking all the boxes and life's great. Other times it might be just the littlest thing that throws them off. So I would recommend, if you're very familiar with the kids that you're working with, and you've got an idea, I think some form of change in behaviour is the sort of like the key clue. So if the kid's normally bubbly and outgoing and really engaged with the rest of their teammates and with you, and that's looking and that's the way they are, then all of a sudden they come in and then over a period of a week or so they're much more quiet. They leave training straight away. They might just give you a head nod to acknowledge you instead of normally coming in and talking to you and stuff like that. So I think one of the things is the change in behaviour, whether it be a physical change, their language. So it really comes down to what do you see, what do you hear, and what do you know. That's if you really want to get some early things about what's going on with a person or even a young kid. So what are you seeing? What are you hearing? And then what do you actually know? And if you can get some information in that space, then I think that will give you an insight into, oh, there's something going on here. I think we need to have a bit of a chat with someone, whether it be with the kid himself or with his parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think there as well, things like changes in physical appearance, maybe not presenting as neatly, or changes in that sense, or maybe weight gain or weight loss or something like that?
Yeah, there you go. Once again, changes of some description.
Yeah.
They come in a bit disheveled, like normally they're immaculately dressed for training. They get to practice, their hair's all over the place, they've got some daggy t-shirt on or something. You're thinking, they've either rushed out of the house or something's gone on, or then it happens next training, then you might find out that the young lad or the young lady, maybe the parents have split up.
Yeah.
And then all hell's broken loose and they're trying to work out how it's all going to work. Might be living out of a bag on the weekends, traveling from here to there. So, it's just one example of just some of probably a myriad of many things that can change behaviour for young people.
And I guess then that's when we can then lead on to those 6 questions.
Yeah,
you've given us in our toolkit that we can use, and it might be that everything's fine, but at least we've gone and asked the question.
Yes, that's right, and they can say, no, everything's good. I just slept in. I just slept in. I didn't have a time to get ready. Yeah,
fantastic. And Zoe's just shared an experience there with us. Zoe Carr, also one of our head coaches for High Performance Country Women, talking about a situation with a young athlete where she was asked to keep that a secret, that she was assisting her with some mental health issues. But Zoe, in that case, did bring the parents into that So again, it's having those boundaries and knowing
Yeah.
that whilst you're not going to share it widely, you know,
Exactly.
we do need to get some people involved to have that assistance and that help.
Yeah, there still needs to be an element of confidentiality. You know, so there's only a certain sphere that you go out to. You know, it doesn't become club knowledge or even team knowledge. Hey, you may not even tell the coach. You know, but when it becomes to a young athlete, the parents definitely need to be in the equation for sure. Like Zoe handled it, very nice.
So thanks for sharing that with us, Zoe. That sort of brings our session to a close today. If there were any follow-up questions that people, you know, didn't feel appropriate to put into the chat box, we will provide a contact email address after the session that you can get in touch. And I want to thank Frank for his time today and giving us some ideas on mental health and wellbeing and really building our awareness in this space. So Frank, thanks very much for today. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Yes, thanks a lot, Justine. I'd like to just thank everybody just giving me your time. It's really greatly appreciated, just myself personally. I hope there were some things that you can go away with today that can help you, not just in our basketball community, but also outside of our basketball community in your own personal life. But as of today, being Basketball Victoria, I'd just like to say we've all got a pretty long journey going forward. It's not something that we're going to bounce back from straight away. There are a lot of byproducts from what's happened in the first 6 months of this year, and but hopefully, being well, that we can bring the sport back to where we want it, where we get great enjoyment and do the things that we've done with it, so many years in the past. But it's going to take a little bit of work, I think, and everyone's sort of like got a bit of give and take, I think, as we move forward dealing with people. Lots of give and take, and I really think, in summary, I just think just keeping connected with people and making sure that they still love the sport even through all this chaos would be a great outcome, and when they're ready to come back, they'll come back.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, thanks so much, Frank, and
Pleasure.
goodbye everyone. Take care.